Greetings, everyone. Welcome to TRG 30, where I am zooming in from snowy in September, Colorado, to talk with you, as always, about the bold change and action that will contribute to our resilient future. And if we're talking about bold and change, we're talking about another B, and that's Barrington Stage. Today's TRG 30 is what we're beginning to call live from the stage, examples of curated and produced content that is live from stages around the globe. Today, our guests are two important leaders at Barrington Stage, who was the first in America to not only say we're going, but to publish the socially distanced plans, not only for seats in the venue, but how to get in and out. I want to welcome today my new friends, Brandon Holdeen, who's the artistic producer at Barrington, and John Haid, who's the director of marketing and communications. Welcome to both of you. As many of you know, because Julia, she's known Boyd, who's the artistic director at Barrington, she's been talking publicly and regularly about the theater company's plans and now realities of having successfully mounted and ran 3 socially distanced productions, and including a 2-performance special of Leslie Kritzer's Is It Over Yet? And this was during, as we all know, the COVID pandemic, and presented on the Tartell Family Outdoor Stage. John, I want to first turn our conversation to you and look at some of the summary data from the set of productions. There were 3 shows, 25 performances. You sold 1,350 tickets, 91% capacity, given what has to go to artists and the rest. You sold every seat, $47 average ticket price, and 24% of the tickets were sold to subscribers, which means a full 75%, 76, was sold to non-subscribers. So when we look at our international COVID sector benchmark and the data from there, we know that people who are buying and advance buying for performances on the aggregate tend to be a little younger, a little bit more diverse socioeconomically. You were there on the ground. Talk a little bit about the audiences that you saw. Who were they?
Yeah. Well, I think we saw a lot of what we typically see, what you would expect to see going to the theater. But yeah, I would say that audiences did skew a little bit younger this year than in the past. Brandon was actually leading our front of house efforts, so he probably saw even more people than I did, although, it was a full staff effort to handle the front of house this year, as again, Brandon well knows, organizing all of our year-round staff into taking the roles that are normally taken by seasonal staff and volunteers.
Yeah,
and things like that.
Yeah, a huge effort. And I'm gonna ask Brandon you to come off mute, and I'm gonna introduce you with a question here in a second. But so you had this group of ticket buyers, the majority of whom were not subscribers.
Yeah.
The average ticket price was $47, not $5, not $20. So pricing, what was the strategy there?
Well, initially, we brought down our prices from where they would be in a normal season. The feeling being that, an outdoor performance might not be as much of a draw. We weren't able to stage a fully staged musical like we would normally do. Harry Clark being a one-man show with very limited set. So we didn't want to overprice it. And then we ran up against the scarcity issue. And once we hit a certain point in the season, we decided that any ticket sold from that point on would be $100 minimum. And to be fair, we didn't have that many tickets to sell at that point, as you can see by the numbers. Like, yes, 91% of our seats were sold, but that's simply because the remainder weren't available to be sold.
Right.
So yeah, scarcity was definitely a factor in bringing that price up.
It is, it's remarkable in the context of the COVID pandemic and so much free content and digital content being sold at $5 and $15 and pay what you can, to hear $100 ticket There was indeed scarcity. There was indeed so many fewer, or there were so many fewer seats to be sold. There was a relationship that I heard in our pre-conversation between availability and price that was part of the strategy. And yet, this wasn't, you shared with me, and this I would just say to both of you, the definition of success wasn't financial, was it?
No. If I was to judge this season, I wouldn't judge this season based on that, actually. The goal was never to make a lot of money off of this season at all. It was primarily to do something, to put on live theater. That's our mission, is to present live theater. And also we, as I explained, in our pre-conversation, in this region in particular, cultural organizations are vital to the economy of our region. And we felt it was our responsibility, our duty to our community locally to put on something so that we could help the hotels around us, the restaurants, the retail shops, get people in their doors, butts in seats, as we say in the theater, and heads in beds, as they say in the hotel business. So yeah, we wanted to make sure to do something to help support our local economy.
Yeah, Brandon, I asked you the question, and I am going to now. How you get here? Like when those first meetings, those first conversations where you're trying to decide, are we going, like, characterize that for us, those first moments of decision making or thoughts?
Well, we got here gradually. It was never on the, plan 400 was to cancel and come back in 2021 and get some free time. But it really was a gradual process of realizing, well, we can't do the first show. Let's postpone that. Then, we can't do a second show. Let's postpone that. And what really clicked for us is when we realized with social distancing in place, we wouldn't be able to open up our smaller theater. And then we actually took a field trip, April, maybe, I don't know anymore, to our main stage. First time a group of us have been together in person in a month or so. And we started talking about, well, we take out a row, we tape off seats. And Julie, our founding artistic director, and I were having a conversation. We're like, oh, it's just kind of like, it's like our stage 2, but bigger. And that's what changed everything. And that's when Julie said, then we need to program it like our stage 2. So out went South Pacific, out went everything. And we really just freed ourselves up to say, it's not going to be a normal season. It's not a normal world. It's not 2020 is something completely different, if you haven't noticed. So we just kept on saying, what is theater? How can we make theater? And how can we make theater that feels like Barrington Stage? That isn't us, phoning it in. So Harry Clark had been on our list for years, the past couple of years, of us wanting to do it. And we're lucky enough that Concord Theatricals let us do it. And we really just kept on being like, what can we do? It was never what can't we do? There's always what can we do? It's like, we can put a stage in a tent and a parking lot of a former Polish community club, and that's theater. So that was literally just the motivation. I don't even know what version of the plan this is at this point, because we went through dozens upon dozens of budgets and calendars to get us here. But it was just, Julie, our artistic leader, is tenacious. She's unstoppable. So, and that's the passion that leads this organization. So always just like, go.
Was there ever a moment where you had to onboard others, a board, staff? Were there people, was it easy to get to yes? Was it just easy?
Yes, because we know when working with our board, they're not going to just say yes unless we have a plan and a budget. Mm-hmm. So our poor general manager did so many budgets that, we had days where we'd do a whole plan, and the next day we throw it away and start over. Mm-hmm. But when we did finally go to the board, it was with, here's the plan, here's the season, well, the season at that point, and here's the budget, and here's how we're gonna make this work. There's a lot of work.
That will resonate with a lot of our viewers today. Lots of iterations of budgets, and in fact, some fatigue around it, and that leads to decision making that is go or or no go. I'm super interested in the fact that you're producing artistic director and yet you're also connected to front of house operations. I think that's reflective of some of the how, like being nimble and having to lead in ways that fill in the cracks and crevices. Can you just say a couple of words about how that happened?
It's very weird. It's because no one was in charge of front of house when we had positions change a few years ago. And I was an off-Broadway house manager to make extra money back in the day. So I was the foolish one who said, Joe, I'll take care of that. I was like, I'll take care of front of house too, why not? While doing literary and producing. But it actually is very helpful that we all kind of we all help out at all different areas here, especially when it's just us. We don't have any seasonal staff or interns this year. So everyone on our staff took time, being bathroom monitors,
Right.
parking lot attendants, temperature takers. So there's a real team family effort here.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of trying to get at. Now is a time when nimbleness is required. And so you had some of that built in and that helped. It sounded like a little bit. Okay, so there's another big how here, and that's around equity. You and the other theater company in the Berkshires were able to work with equity to get permission to move forward. I know it's on everyone's minds. How did that happen?
It's not a coincidence that the first two theaters are a mile from each other. And when I normally tell this to groups, they don't like it so much. But the reason why we were able to reopen is because how seriously our governor, our state, our politicians, and our mayor has taken this this pandemic. Like that's the reason why we're down the street from each other. It's nothing magical. It was a lot of work, but our positivity rate right now in Berkshire County for the past 2 weeks is 0.34%.
Right.
When we got up to when the state got up to beyond 1%, that's when the governor cut outdoor occupancy limits. So it's not a coincidence. We kind of worked together. We were talking to each other, but it really is because our state and our city and our county has taken this so seriously.
So both of you, John, I look to you too. Your patrons who attended, how were they? What was it like in the venue? What were they like?
They were very well behaved. That's the first thing that comes to mind anyway. I was worried going in, honestly, that we would constantly have to be policing people on the mask wearing and sanitization protocols. And, I won't lie, there were probably one or two grumbles throughout the way, but from what I saw, people were very, very well behaved and kept their masks on and followed all the rules. And they loved having the opportunity to see live performance. They were ultimately, I think, very grateful that this opportunity was there.
Yeah, Brandon, you said that they were sort of policing each other even a little.
Oh yeah, they're snitches. They would, if someone would touch their mask too much before the show, a patron would come up to someone on the staff saying, she's touching her mask a lot. Can you talk to her? When one person removed their mask to unlock their phone and take a selfie on Instagram, and right away patrons came up and said, she took off her mask. So they took care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It was really great.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Okay, so in some respects, this is theater. This is what you do. And so that. And in other respects, it's wildly different. It's early going, but what have you learned so far from this experience?
I'll go first. One of the things that we learned is that we're an incredibly community-minded organization here. And we had a major faux pas when doing this plan. When we realized we wouldn't be able to be indoors, we had to take the tent outside. It happens the parking lot we use had to be across the street from our second stage and our cabaret. And we quickly got a tent, got to put up fencing, security guard. And we realized in our need to solve the problem and continue doing theater, we forgot about our neighborhood and our community. So if you're one of our neighbors, what you saw was one day a big tent appears, the next day a fence is around it, and there's a security guard 24/7, and then on the third day there's a Barrington Stage box office, and they're doing something inside that tent. And that was just us being bad neighbors. So we had to do a lot of repair work, going around talking to them. There was some acting out there's happening. When we first got there, but after we started engaging our community, the neighborhood really kind of calmed down and started to embrace us, included that we gave our one free night in the tent, we gave over to the community for a local talent show that we called West Side Takes the Stage, because we're in the West Side neighborhood there. But it's one of those things that we kind of, it's like 3 or 4 performances in where we went, oh, yeah, bad neighbor. We're a bad neighbor. We did not talk to anyone. We just put up a tent and started doing theater in a parking lot we just didn't even think about it because we're just trying to solve the problem. So we know going forward, we definitely need to be better neighbors and think beyond us when we're solving our problems, because it's part of our community.
Super interesting lesson, because lots of people are thinking about this or doing it. And just that one share is, I think, really important. John, is there something that you would say? I learned this as marketing and comms guy.
Well, I would just say, adding on to that, something we learned even at the beginning of this pandemic and throughout that, it relates to what Brandon's talking about, is there's no such thing as over communication right now. And that includes, the standard marketing channels. That includes the standard marketing channels, but also things like being on the ground, and talking to our neighbors and all that. Like we just need to make sure to communicate with people as much as possible.
Yeah.
And, we've found that audiences respond to that. They're not, in a normal year, you would say, oh, if you're sending out, 2 or 3 e-blasts a week, that's going to be too much and people are going to tune out. Or, if you're just communicating too much. But I don't think we saw that this year. I think people appreciate us communicating with them a lot, because especially, with all the changes in our season, we had to reach out to them multiple times to say, hey, would you be willing to change your tickets for this performance to a completely different performance, or a performance that was supposed to be live is now becoming virtual, and are you going to keep your tickets for that, or would you donate them? And so there were multiple layers of that and multiple stages of that happening. But overall, I think it's just better to communicate more.
My colleague Stephen has come, which means it's time for questions. Stephen, take us.
Thank you, Jill. And please do submit your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. John, I wonder if I could just start with you a couple of questions. First, around the communications that you've talked about, over communicating being fine. But I wonder, you talked about the compliance with the audience around your safety protocols. And there's a lot of debate about how much we should and shouldn't communicate around safety protocols at the moment. Is too much making it feel as though I shouldn't come because it's unsafe? Is there any recommendations you'd share around the comms or the feedback that you heard from your patrons around your safety protocols?
I would say there that, again, over communication is not possible. You want to spell everything out. I think by the way that we did it, spelling out every last detail of what your experience was going to be, as far as cleanliness, as far as sanitization procedures during, before, after the show. I think having all that detail made people feel more comfortable about attending. I certainly felt comfortable about, sitting in the audience. Like I brought my 7-year-old daughter with me to see the Rodgers and Hammerstein review. Harry Clark was a little mature for her, so I didn't bring her to that one. But I think having that communicated clearly was a bonus. I think that made people feel more comfortable, especially in this time of COVID, as we keep saying.
And so they've had or chosen to have this experience or not. What's your plan now with audience engagement going forwards? There's unknown territory in front of us, but what's your strategy next?
Sure. Well, yeah. Again, it is, as you say, it's unknown right now, and we're sort of getting ready to go back to a little bit of where we were back in March and April. Not necessarily full shutdown mode, but we don't have any other live performances planned for the immediate future. you know, we're getting into colder weather here, as, you know, Jill indicated in the beginning. Seems to have hit Colorado a little early, but that just means it's not far behind here. And unfortunately, we can't do performances outdoor under a tent in the snow. So, you know, we had this great video series during the whole lockdown, BSC at Home, that was a wonderful way of keeping connected with our audiences and also prepping them for what they were going to see on our stages. You know, Mark H. Dold, one of our associate artists, he was a treasure to work with during that whole period and kept feeding us more content to put up. So doing videos, and maybe, I mean, this is more Brandon's area, maybe there'll be more digital programming. We do have another digital performance coming up in 2 weeks called 3 Viewings. It's sort of 3 monologues. So we've got that still coming up, and then hopefully getting back to live performance at some point. Mm-hmm. That's what we do.
Thank you. Brandon, I wonder if perhaps financial success wasn't the success factor for the season. How does Barrington measure their success?
In this year, I'll say the fact that we're still here, and we had an audience, and our audience loved it, and that the fact that we did theater and we continued on mission is the success. Mm-hmm. We'd said at one point, the joke in the early stages was, boy, quitting and canceling would be so much easier than this. And when you're on budget 500, you really start thinking that. But for us, the success is that we did it. And maybe, you know, and maybe we'll be in a tent next year, maybe not. But speak about programming going forward. Julie and I think that once the governor lets us have 100 people indoors or more, we will need only 3 weeks to get something up and running. And we kind of have a plan of, you know, what if it happens in October? What if it happens in November, December, January? That we kind of created like a little short list of like, quickly pull that one out. And now, you know, one of the things is we want to do 3 viewings on the stage because we know we can get equity to approve it. But we're waiting. Once we get 100, you know, we can rehearse something and get something back on stage pretty quickly.
You've talked about the family ethos, and there's a question here around how your staff and team have felt about doing jobs that might not be their own, and has there been pay cuts? How have you handled and maintained the culture of being an employee at Barrington Stage through this time?
That also happened gradually. It became very clear to the year-round staff when, you know, these positions weren't coming back this summer, and then these positions weren't coming back, and then suddenly none of the positions were coming back. And we had very honest conversations with them saying, we're all working front of house. And there was a little bit of grumbling that we heard about. And finally, just one day in a smaller group setting with some of the staff, I said, before it was about saving the season and saving our jobs. Now it's about saving the theater and the city. And now everyone's job description, if you go to the last bullet point, it says other duties as assigned. This is now your job. And this is all of our jobs. So, you know, our general manager was scanning tickets. We all did it. But it was very much the sense of like, in order for this to happen, and honestly, for you to still have a job, we all have to do this together. And everyone jumped, like no complaints after that. Everyone worked front of house. No one played hooky. Everyone got like, this is what we're doing. And how lucky are we that we get to do this?
There's a question around the financial position of the company going into this, and were you able to walk into this in a strong position, and would your decisions have been different were the business in a different place heading into this pandemic?
We came into it in a strong position. The 2019 season was not a gigantic financial success. By no means was it a gigantic loss, but we have very strong financials. We have a board that until recently insists that all of our buildings we own outright. We just took our first mortgage last year. So we own everything. We're great on assets, low on liabilities. So yeah, if we had gone into this with a massive deficit, we probably would have done something different. But we're also we have the Next Act campaign that's raised $1 million so we can make sure we can do 2021 because of all those beautiful subscribers who have postponed their subscriptions to next year, we know we're going to be very cash poor very soon, because that's when we bring in all the money for the subscriptions. We already have that money. We kind of already spent it. So we're all preparing. We have a board that's very big on very strong financials and budgeting here.
Jill, I know time is ticking. What I want to say is there's a ton of tactical questions here around the how, and I think, you know, it would be great for us to find a way to share that after today. But perhaps one more question, which is around the experience artistically of distancing and reduced capacity, and how did that impact the aesthetics, and how did that impact the director and actor during rehearsals and performance? Is there any snippet that you'd give us there?
Yeah, it's weird. The big thing that changed is that we were in the final days of rehearsals for Harry Clark indoors. We had to go outdoors, and when you have a tent, there's these poles that keep the tent upright, and they're kind of always in the way. So we learned very quickly, Julie had to restage Mark quite a bit, so he moves around more, because if he stands still, someone can't see him. And that was the biggest deciding factor. And then also, when we moved into anything with singing, instead of the first row being 10 feet from the actor, they were then 25 feet from the actor. Sorry, 15 feet to 25 feet. And it took the actors a bit of time to figure out how to navigate that they're so far away that there's this trench that I call the DMZ between them. And our first row is normally, 3 feet from the stage. And that was hard for the actors at first to kind of figure out how to make a connection with someone 25 feet away, up to 60 feet away, and you can only see their eyes. So it's very difficult, but they learned to navigate. But all of them said the first performance was just weird. Exhilarating, but weird.
So Stephen, I will find a way to make sure that those questions that you're asking that are more how-tos do get to Brandon and John, so that we can get some of those answered for you. As we wrap to the bottom of the hour, I want to remind you, we'll come back to Brandon and John here just before we go, but want to remind you about what's coming up next. I am as excited about next week as I was about this one. Rahaf Harfouch, who's the author of a book called Hustle and Float, and about how you, the book is about how you bring creativity to creatives, and how we structure our thinking and work lives and lives to get the most creativity out of the creative professional and creative sector. Really interested in talking with her about bringing creativity back to the creative sector. Also, live from the stage mid-month, or at the end of the month, is with Birmingham Royal Ballet, who are doing really innovative things with dance and partnership. We'll be talking to them, as well as about governance. Always you can register, and should, at this URL, and as Stephen has indicated, we'll follow up in an email with you. Finally, I would just remind you that we are here, the Resiliency Group. We are here to provide you free resources. If you haven't already, we are continuing to lean and invest in our free COVID sector benchmark so that you can put your own data in the context of this pandemic, and over time be provided tools that will help you move through as it relates to your patrons and in the context of your industry and market, and always custom and bespoke solutions for you at this time. Listen, I couldn't thank you enough, John and Brandon, for joining us. And as we wrap up, I would just want to invite you, you know that TRG 30 is about inspiring courageous behavior, inspiring bold thinking. I prepared you for, and want to just give you the opportunity to say something to this group as we sign off. John, why don't you go first?
Sure. I mean, I had written down something here, but I'm second guessing it now. But I think just the experience of live theater itself, being able to continue with live theater in this environment, and to see audiences responding to it in such a positive way. To be fair, that it was self-selected. This was the group of people who decided they were comfortable attending. But it was just generally inspiring to see art produced even under duress, you know, even under these circumstances.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you know, the one moment that really stuck with me, I think more than any, is, you know, Ellen Green, one of our associate artists, getting up during Rodgers and Hammerstein, the review, and singing Edelweiss, and the way he connected to it personally. I think at this time, both of COVID and, you know, everything with Black Lives Matter in the country right now. You know, he was talking about connecting with the song, a man who loves his country, but his country has turned his back on him. And just that moment,
Yeah.
it's like repeatedly, I saw it personally and also in the House reports every night. Audiences just connected with that so much, night after night after night. And it was such a heartrending moment. And just to be able to deliver those moments still, even in the midst of this pandemic, I think that's where the success of this season
Yeah,
comes
John,
in.
thank you for that. That's such an inspiration. Brandon, we're at the bottom of the hour quickly, but we need to hear from you.
Yeah, don't think about what you can't do, think about what you can. And things you can't do is solve the pandemic. And like any good actor, you have given circumstances. And your given circumstances are people need to stay away from each other, wear masks. And like for us, it's just, what I always think about is like, great, that's our given circumstances. And now how are we going to make art?
Yeah.
Because I can't make a vaccine and I'm not in the government, but what I can do is make art, and there's things I can't change, so embrace them and do. Don't think what you can't do, just do what you can.
Just do what you can. Thank you, both of you. Stephen, always thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Over and out.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.